Somewhere deep in the northern forests lies a secret no one has ever known. A man lived there alone for decades until one day someone dared to step inside his home. What they found changed everything. Watch closely. The story is just beginning. Subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The northern forests of Karelia stretched endlessly, a sea of ancient trees whispering in the cold wind. The air carried the scent of pine and frozen earth, and the silence was broken only by the crack of branches under the weight of snow. In this isolated wilderness lived Nikolai Romanov, a man whose name had long vanished from any official record. Years ago, he had been a military engineer known for his precision and calm under pressure. After the war ended, however, something within him shifted. The noise of cities, the endless movement of people, the hollow comfort of concrete walls, all of it became unbearable. He sought refuge in solitude deep in a place where no one would follow. He found an ancient oak at the edge of a frozen valley, its trunk wide enough to hide a secret. Over the years, using his skills and patience, he built a small home within the heart of that tree. The outside world saw only a rough wooden door half covered in moss, and a small window that glowed faintly at night. Inside, the space was simple: a wooden cot, shelves made from fallen branches, a stove that hummed quietly through long winters. Nikolai had no need for more. He had taught himself to live with the rhythm of the forest, to fish when rivers thawed, to gather berries in the brief northern summer, to trap small animals when food was scarce. Each day began the same way. At dawn, he stepped outside, inhaling the frozen air and checking his traps before returning to warm his hands by the fire. Sometimes he spoke aloud, not to anyone, but to the trees, as if they were the last beings who remembered what silence meant. His only companions were the sounds of the forest, the creak of ice, the distant call of a raven, the faint rustle of wind moving through branches older than history itself. The years blended together until time itself lost meaning. The small house became part of the forest, its wooden walls darkened by rain and smoke. Inside, Nikolai kept a small journal, its pages filled with sketches of mechanisms, tools, and designs for structures that no one else would ever see. Beneath his calm exterior, his mind remained restless. The same precision that had served him in the military now found peace in creation. He carved wooden figures, birds, faces, and intricate patterns that told stories only he understood. Each piece was a fragment of memory, a quiet reflection of a life once filled with duty and loss. In the evenings, when the sun dipped below the horizon and the world turned blue with frost, Nikolai sat by his lamp and read the few books he had carried with him when he left civilization. Most were worn technical manuals, but one was a volume of Russian poetry, its edges frayed, the ink faded. He read it not for meaning, but for rhythm, the sound of language reminding him that he was still human, even if no one else would ever know. Occasionally, he saw signs of travelers, boot prints in the snow or distant campfire smoke, but they never came close. He preferred it that way. He had long ago built a path around his home, cleverly disguised to make intruders think the land was impassable. The forest protected him, and in return, he respected its silence. His home was more than shelter. It was a sanctuary, a line drawn between him and the world he had abandoned. Still, there were nights when the wind howled so fiercely that even Nikolai, who feared nothing, felt a twinge of unease. The great oak groaned and swayed, its massive roots holding firm against storms that could shatter smaller trees. In those moments, he would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him. It was as though the tree itself were alive, keeping watch over him as he slept. As years passed, the outside world changed in ways he could only imagine. Technology advanced, cities grew brighter, and human noise reached places where it had never been before. But here in the forest, time stood still. The seasons repeated their cycle, the snow always returning, the rivers always freezing, the earth always whispering secrets that no one but Nikolai could hear. He had become part of the land, an unseen presence, a legend perhaps whispered about by hunters or locals in the nearest village. Yet even legends grow old. Nikolai's hair turned white, his movements slower, though his eyes remained sharp and filled with purpose. He no longer thought of the man he once was. He was no longer the soldier, or the engineer. He was simply a caretaker of silence, living proof that peace could be found only when one stopped seeking it. But as autumn bled once again into winter, the forest began to change in ways Nikolai had not seen before. The wind grew harsher, the snow deeper, and the air carried a strange tension. Animals moved differently, restless, uneasy. He noticed cracks forming in the great oak's bark and felt a deep, instinctive worry. Nature was warning him of something. One evening, as he sat by the fire sharpening his knife, the flame flickered unnaturally, and he thought he heard a faint sound beyond the door, a distant echo of footsteps muffled by snow. He froze, listening. The forest was vast and rarely disturbed. Visitors never came this far. For the first time in years, he felt the pulse of another presence approaching through the night. He stood, moved to the window, and peered into the darkness. There was nothing but swirling snow. Yet somewhere beyond the trees, he sensed change was coming. He did not know that soon this storm would bring not only danger, but a stranger who would uncover the secret he had guarded for decades. The secret buried deep beneath the roots of the oak that had sheltered him all these years. The first snow of winter fell quietly over the forest, wrapping every branch and rock in a white stillness that seemed eternal. Nikolai stood at the doorway of his treehouse, watching the storm clouds gather over the horizon. He had survived countless winters before, but something about this one felt different. The air was heavier, the sky darker, and even the birds had vanished days earlier. He moved slowly, storing firewood, checking his traps, making sure his provisions would last. The great oak creaked beneath the weight of frost, and though it had sheltered him for decades, he sensed unease in its groaning timbers. Far away in the small settlement of Novologa, a message arrived at the forest inspection office. It was brief. Reports of an old man seen months ago near the northern ridge, now missing since the early snowstorms began. Most ignored it. People sometimes disappeared in these woods, swallowed by weather or silence. But Inspector Anna Kusa, known for her persistence and calm judgment, decided to go. The journey would be dangerous. The blizzard warnings were already in effect. Yet, she felt a quiet conviction that this check could not wait. She packed her supplies: radio, thermal blanket, food, and an old map marked with fading trails, and set off before dawn. The path to Nikolai's forest was long and treacherous. Snow fell in thick sheets, blinding her vision, and the wind howled like a living thing. Anna moved slowly, following faint tracks that led deeper into the wilderness. She had heard rumors about the hermit who lived somewhere beyond the frozen river, a man who had once worked in the city, who had vanished after the war, choosing the trees over people. Few believed he still lived. Yet locals spoke of a faint light sometimes seen among the branches during winter nights. Hours passed, and her legs ached from trudging through drifts that reached her knees. The radio crackled and died as the signal faded, leaving only the rhythm of her breath and the hiss of snow. Still, she pressed on. Somewhere beyond the ridge, she knew was the man she sought. As daylight dimmed into gray twilight, she saw it at last, a faint wisp of smoke rising between the trees. Relief filled her chest. She followed the trail upward, pushing through branches heavy with snow, until she reached a small clearing. There, half hidden by roots and frost, stood the strangest dwelling she had ever seen. The structure looked like part of the forest itself, built into the side of a massive oak whose trunk rose so wide it seemed impossible. A small wooden door stood at its base, framed by bark and moss. A dim light flickered through a narrow window. Anna hesitated, brushing snow from her coat, then knocked gently. For a long time, there was no answer, only the sound of wind moving through the branches. Then a bolt slid, and the door creaked open just enough for a pair of gray eyes to appear. Nikolai looked at her with weary confusion. His beard was thick and white, his face weathered but alert. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and rough from disuse. "I'm with the Forest Service," Anna replied, lifting her badge. "We received reports. People were concerned for your safety. There's a storm coming." He frowned, but didn't close the door. "The forest takes care of its own," he muttered. "And I'm part of it now." Still, there was something in her tone, calm but determined, that made him hesitate. After a moment, he stepped aside and gestured for her to enter. She ducked under the frame and found herself in a dim, cramped room lit by a single oil lamp. The air smelled of pine resin and smoke. Tools hung neatly along the wall, and stacks of books rested beside a small stove. Everything was clean, but aged, handmade, built with care and purpose. Anna removed her gloves and looked around quietly. "You built all this yourself?" she asked. Nikolai nodded, sitting on a stool near the fire. "Every piece. Nothing wasted here." His gaze drifted toward the window where snow pressed against the glass. People forget what it means to live with the land. They build too much, take too much. The warmth of the stove began to fill the space, but Anna could still feel the cold radiating from the wooden floor. She studied him carefully, sensing the mixture of solitude and quiet pride that surrounded him. "You've been alone a long time," she said softly. He gave a slight shrug. "Alone is not the same as lonely. The forest speaks if you listen." Outside, the storm intensified. The wind rattled the walls and snow began to seep through the cracks. The oak groaned again, a long, deep sound that made the lamp flicker. Anna instinctively glanced upward, uneasy. Nikolai rose, frowning, and pressed his palm against the nearest beam as if feeling the pulse of the tree. "It's strong," he murmured, "but the wind's wrong tonight." A loud crack suddenly echoed from above, followed by a shudder that ran through the floor. The lamp trembled. Anna grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. Nikolai's expression hardened. Without another word, he strode to the corner of the room and yanked a worn rug aside. Beneath it, faint metal lines glimmered under the lamplight, forming a rectangular outline. "What is that?" Anna asked, startled. He didn't answer immediately. His hands moved quickly, tracing the edges until he found a concealed handle. The wood creaked as he tried to lift it, but the panel refused to budge. "Help me," he said, voice tense. She knelt beside him, gripping the other side. Together, they pulled, their breath clouding in the cold air. With a groan, the heavy cover gave way, revealing a dark opening below. A gust of air rushed upward, colder than the storm outside. Anna peered into the hole, her heart pounding. Wooden steps descended into blackness, vanishing beneath the floor. "What's down there?" she whispered. Nikolai met her gaze. "What I've been protecting," he said quietly, "and what no one else was meant to see." The wind roared outside, shaking the entire tree. Snow burst through the cracks like white smoke. Anna looked toward the door, then back at the shadowed stairway below. Between the fury of the storm and the mystery beneath her feet, there was no real choice left. Nikolai lit a lantern, its flame steady despite the tremor in his hand. He nodded toward the stairs. "Come," he said. "It's safer below." She followed him down into the darkness, leaving the howling wind behind. As the wooden panels slid shut above them, the world of snow and storm disappeared, replaced by the quiet hum of something hidden, something alive beneath the roots of the ancient oak. The air below was still and cool, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and oil. Anna descended the narrow steps, her lantern casting long shadows on the earthen walls. The passageway curved gently, and as they reached the bottom, the dim light revealed a small chamber carved into the ground. It was far larger than she expected, the ceiling supported by thick wooden beams that gleamed faintly with resin. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and the sound of dripping water echoed faintly from somewhere beyond. Nikolai moved ahead of her, his steps sure and steady, the lantern in his hand revealing rows of shelves filled with tools, bottles, and mechanical parts. "This is incredible," Anna whispered, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "You built all of this." He nodded but said nothing. His eyes moved across the room as though checking every detail, every joint, every seam, like a man who knew the exact pulse of the place he had created. The chamber felt both ancient and alive, a blend of raw earth and careful engineering. There was a hum, barely perceptible, that seemed to come from deep within the walls. Anna touched one and felt warmth beneath her fingers. The storm above raged on, but down here, the world was quiet. The wind's roar was replaced by a faint vibration, like the steady breathing of the earth. Nikolai placed the lantern on a small table and began adjusting a set of copper pipes that snaked along the wall. "The generator should still hold," he muttered, half to himself. A moment later, a soft glow flickered through the room as hidden lamps came to life. Anna gasped. The space transformed under the light. The underground chamber opened into multiple sections, a workshop filled with handmade instruments and sketches pinned to the walls. A living area with a cot, a wooden stove, and shelves lined with jars of preserved food. Every object was crafted by hand, precise, functional, yet beautiful. The craftsmanship was astonishing. Even the handles on the cupboards bore carved patterns of leaves and waves. I spent years learning how to shape the world the way it was meant to be, Nikolai said finally, his voice calmer now. Up is only the surface, noise and distraction. Down here, things last. Anna moved slowly through the room, her eyes taking in the detail. You live under the tree? She asked. The tree is just the beginning, he replied. The oak's roots keep the earth firm. I reinforced the tunnels with what I could find, reclaimed wood, old metal, even stone from the riverbed. Every storm that comes, every winter that freezes the soil, I learn how to make it stronger. The forest teaches if you listen. She stopped beside a small table covered in intricate carvings. Tiny figures of animals and people were shaped from the same wood that formed the beams overhead. They looked almost alive, their details so fine that she could see the lines of fur, the folds of cloth, the expressions etched into their faces. You made these too, she said, awed. He smiled faintly. Memories, he said, of what I used to see, of people I once knew. There was a strange calm in his voice, a balance between pride and melancholy. Anna began to understand that this underground world was not a hiding place. It was a monument. Every beam, every pipe, every carving was a piece of his life woven into the heart of the earth. He had not built it to escape, but to preserve something he feared the world would lose. She followed him into another section through a low archway. The air grew cooler, the walls smoother. Here was a living space carved with care. A cot stood against the far wall covered with woolen blankets. Beside it was a stone basin connected to a narrow pipe dripping clean water. A simple table held a collection of candles, a compass, and a worn notebook bound in leather. Anna opened it gently. Inside were sketches of mechanical designs, notes written in precise handwriting and dates that stretched back decades. You've lived here for most of your life, she said. Yes, Nikolai answered quietly. Since the first year I left the city, I came here with nothing but tools and an idea. I thought it would take months to make a shelter, but when I finished, I realized I had only begun. He walked to the far wall and placed his hand against it. Every tunnel, every beam, every drop of water down here, I shaped it. The earth has a language. If you listen long enough, it tells you where to dig, where to stop. The forest above is alive because of the balance down here. We are connected, the roots and I. Anna watched him, unsure if he spoke metaphor or truth. But there was conviction in his words that made her believe he felt it deeply. The faint vibration of the generators filled the silence. Somewhere in the distance, water flowed through pipes like veins beneath the soil. She turned toward him. You could have shared this. People would have learned from what you built. You could have changed lives. He shook his head. People would have destroyed it. They always do. When they find something pure, they twist it until it fits their own needs. I built this for peace, not power. I didn't want it to become another machine in their hands. Anna fell silent, feeling the weight of his isolation. She realized that this place, for all its wonder, was also a prison. The walls that protected him also kept him apart from the world he once knew. His solitude was his creation as much as his sanctuary. She looked again at the carvings, at the precise order of his surroundings, and saw in them both brilliance and loneliness. The storm outside had calmed. The distant rumble faded, replaced by the soft drip of melting snow. A faint shaft of light filtered through a narrow opening in the ceiling where roots intertwined with wooden beams. Anna stepped closer and touched the wall beneath it, feeling warmth seep from the sun above. For a moment, she felt as if she were standing inside the heart of the forest itself. Nikolai approached her holding a small wooden carving of a bird. He placed it gently in her hand. You should take this, he said, a reminder of what silence can build. She looked down at the bird, its wings spread as if ready to fly. Why me? She asked. Because you listened, he said simply. Most people never do. They stood there in silence, surrounded by the hum of the underground chamber, the last echoes of the storm fading above. Anna realized that she had not merely discovered a hidden dwelling, but a living testament to patience and devotion. Nikolai had built something beyond shelter. He had carved meaning into the bones of the earth itself. When she finally turned to leave, he followed her to the base of the ladder leading upward. The air above shimmered faintly with returning daylight. "The storm has passed," he said. "You can go now. The forest will guide you." She hesitated at the first rung, looking down one last time. He stood beneath her, his figure framed by the golden light of the lantern, his expression calm and knowing. She nodded silently, then began to climb. Each step took her closer to the surface, the sound of the wind growing louder until she pushed open the hatch and felt the chill of the world above. When she looked back, the opening had already begun to close, the wooden panel sliding seamlessly into place. The treehouse above was still standing, though the snow had nearly buried it. The forest was silent again, untouched, as if nothing extraordinary lay beneath its roots. But Anna knew better. Deep under the frozen soil, a man lived in harmony with the earth, his hands shaping quiet miracles that no one else would ever see. The forest above lay still beneath a pale morning sky, the storm's fury now only a memory whispered by the wind through the branches. Anna stood at the edge of the clearing, her breath visible in the cold air as she looked back toward the massive oak that concealed Nikolai's secret world. The snow around its roots was undisturbed, smooth and perfect, as if no one had ever walked there. The air was calm, almost reverent. It was hard to believe that beneath her feet, carved deep into the earth, existed an entire life's work, a sanctuary built by one man's patience and devotion. She turned her gaze toward the distant horizon, where the faint smoke of the nearest village rose beyond the trees. She knew she had to return, though every step away from the oak felt like a betrayal. Her journey back through the forest was quiet. The storm had stripped the branches bare, leaving behind a landscape washed clean and glimmering with frost. As she walked, she replayed the night in her mind. The trembling walls of the treehouse, the hidden hatch, the labyrinth of rooms beneath the earth, the glow of warm light against polished wood. It all felt unreal, like a dream that would dissolve the moment she spoke of it aloud. Yet, the small wooden bird in her pocket was solid beneath her glove, its carved wings smooth against her palm. It was proof that what she had seen was no illusion. By the time she reached the edge of the forest, the sun was low, painting the snow in shades of gold and blue. She paused for a moment, listening to the distant creak of ice and the faint cry of a raven overhead. When she finally reached the road that led to Novologa, her radio crackled weakly to life. Voices broke through the static, calls from her colleagues asking about her status, warning of the storm's aftermath. She lifted the device to her lips and hesitated. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her mind caught between duty and something she could not quite name. Then she pressed the button and spoke evenly, her voice calm. The man was found. He's safe. No further assistance needed. That night, back in her small cabin near the lake, Anna sat by the window, watching the snowfall. The world outside seemed distant, softened by the flicker of the fire. On the table before her rested the carving Nikolai had given her. She turned it slowly in her hands, the details illuminated by the flame, the fine lines of its feathers, the careful shaping of its wings. There was something alive in the craftsmanship, a quiet strength that spoke of time and solitude. She placed it on the windowsill where the light could touch it, then opened her notebook and began to write. But the words would not come. Every sentence she started felt wrong, too simple, too human for what she had seen. In the end, she closed the book and sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle. Days passed. The storm damage was cleared, and life in the settlement resumed its rhythm. No one mentioned the old man in the forest again. When someone asked about her trip, Anna only said that the cabin was empty and that the man had likely moved on before the snow. The explanation satisfied them. People preferred simple answers, ones that didn't reach too far beneath the surface. But Anna knew he was still there. She could feel it in the stillness of the woods whenever she walked near the ridge. Once, weeks later, she thought she saw smoke again, just a faint thread rising above the treetops, visible only for a moment before it vanished into the gray sky. It could have been anything, she told herself. But deep down she knew it was him. Nikolai Romanov, the man who had built a world beneath the earth, still tending to his hidden sanctuary while the forest stood guard above. Winter slowly loosened its grip and spring crept across Karelia. The snow melted, filling rivers with cold, rushing water. The forest came alive again, birds returning, buds forming on the branches, life pushing through the soil that had once been frozen solid. Anna often walked the path that led to the clearing, though she never went all the way. She would stop at the edge, listening to the wind rustling through the leaves, half expecting to hear the faint hum of the underground generators or the echo of tools striking wood. But the forest offered only silence, deep and undisturbed. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Anna sat on a fallen log and looked toward the horizon where the oak stood hidden among the shadows. She took the carved bird from her pocket again and held it up to the fading light. The wood caught the glow, its wings gleaming gold for a moment before the light disappeared. She smiled faintly, realizing that Nikolai had given her more than a carving. He had given her a piece of his peace, a reminder that even in a world filled with noise, silence could still be built by hand. When she finally stood to leave, the forest was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind. She turned one last time toward the oak, feeling a strange sense of gratitude. Somewhere below, beneath roots and soil, a man continued to live by his own design, untouched by time, shaping his world in the dark with patience and purpose. Anna walked back toward the path, her footprints marking a single trail through the snow. Behind her, the wind rose gently, sweeping the prints away until the ground was smooth once more. The forest returned to silence, the great oak standing tall against the twilight, guarding the secret of the man who had chosen to live not above the earth, but within it. And beneath its ancient roots, Nikolai Romanov sat in the soft glow of his hidden lamps, carving another figure from reclaimed wood. A new creation for a world that would never see it, but that would always quietly remember him. The story has come to an end, but its mystery remains. What do you think happened next? Share your thoughts and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.